When I walk into my studio in the morning or when I open up my laptop, there's one thing that I want, and that is to just dive straight into the work and lose everything else and stay there for hours, forget the time passing, and just be completely committed in the work. That's what I want, and I'm pretty sure that's what pretty much everybody else here wants as well. This is the dream, right? It'd be Picasso in the studio. But the reality is, so then there's actually a word for this that's been sort of bandied around for the last 20 or so years, which is flow, and it was coined by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Yes, that is how you pronounce it. And he wrote this book, Flow, in the early 90s. I put the early 90s cover on there because that's when I read it. I had to search really hard. This isn't what it looks like now. But flow is a term that he came up with for the psychology of optimal experience. And it's not, strictly speaking, connected to art, but I think that he and everybody else sort of really understand that creating is one of the key ways that we enter into a flow state. And there are certain characteristics that he defines of a flow state. So he says that a flow state includes an intense and focused concentration on the present. So that's the kind of losing your sense of time and really being in the moment. It's very aligned with our mindfulness idea of today. A loss of reflective self-consciousness. So you are not aware of your body. You're not aware even of your emotions. If you've been in a flow state, if you can sort of imagine what that feels like, it actually isn't joyful. It isn't like super excited. You lose all of that emotional level because your concentration is so fully engaged in what you're doing. A sense of personal control or agency. And this is really important. I'm going to get back to this several times. This is where you feel like you actually you're stretching your capabilities to the utmost. You're working at the outer edge, the bleeding edge of what you're capable of, but you are capable of it. You know you can get there. You know you can make it work. And that's really, really important for that flow state, is having that sense of like, I'm capable of doing this. It's in my control. Also, a subjective experience of time is altered in the flow state. So this is the sort of hours passing like minutes idea that we've all experienced before, and the experience of the activity as intrinsically rewarding. So in the same way that you are in the moment and you're mindful of being here now and just being present with the work, you're also not thinking about like, oh, and this book is going to be so awesome when it's published. You're thinking about, what am I doing today? What am I doing right now? And you're in that moment with the work. So why should we seek flow? Well, that seems kind of obvious, right? What I just told you seems like, well, yeah, we should seek flow, right? But there are actually other things that go along with it as well, and that other thinkers have talked more recently about other benefits of the flow state that are a little bit more worldly, shall we say. So peak creativity, peak productivity. Productivity in the sense of producing stuff that's worth producing and not just stuff, not just emails answered, but like the work that we want to be known for, right? So Daniel Pink is one of these people. He wrote a book called Drive, and he's talking about, he talks about optimal workplaces. How do you create a workplace that is going to support people working there to be their best selves and to do their best work and to be loyal and to stick with you and all that kind of stuff. So it's more instrumental. It's more about like coming from the top down. But what he says is 3 factors lead to better performance and personal satisfaction: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, you are working on your own, you feel in control of this thing. Mastery, you're working at that bleeding edge, but you know you can do it, it's under your control. And purpose, you know why you're doing this, you care about the work, it's something that's important to you and that you've been doing for a long time. So all of those things are one-to-one with flow. Another person who's talked about this is Cal Newport, the author of Deep Work. So you may have heard of the book Deep Work. It came out pretty recently. A lot of people are talking about it. I read it a few years ago, 15 years or so difference from when I read Flow. And at the time, I didn't really think about it, but Deep Work is flow. It's the same thing. Like, he's talking about the exact same phenomenon. But he's coming at it from a different angle, which is more about how do we make ourselves indispensable in today's economy. Like, what is the kind of work that's actually going to be well paid, that's going to last in the world. And so also from a more utilitarian point of view, he talks about it, and he says 2 core abilities for thriving in the new economy are the ability to quickly master hard things and the ability to perform at an elite level in terms of both quality and speed. And these are both qualities that both cause flow and that make flow happen, but that they also are that they result from being able to be in flow regularly or in deep work. So I am a published author. I've published a dozen or so books, been doing that since 1991. I've been a visual arts professor. I teach at PAFA around the corner since 1998 and, designed dozens of classes. I've been teaching and coaching creative focus, which is kind of what I call like this category of thinking about creative life, since 2015. It's clear that my achievements in life, my career, is dependent on an ability to tap into flow. But I would say that is not the most important thing about flow. Self-actualization is why I really care about this. I mean, let's be real. Everybody in this room is creative, probably a professional creative. It's hard, right? Doing this, making this career work, making a life as a professional creative is really, really hard. So why do we do it? Why do we put ourselves through this? And I would argue it's because of flow. That's why we're doing this, because you've experienced it before in the context of your work, and you're like, that's what I want. If I can have that in my life on a regular basis in my work, that's what I want. It's not about joy. It's about feeling fully yourself and fully utilized in that self-actualized way. And that term, self-actualization, refers to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is divided up. This is basically human needs and sort of all the human needs that motivate us. And there's, the hierarchy is about what's the most basic and least basic, and sort of what's most important to make sure is secure. So at the bottom, you have physical needs, safety and physical, food, shelter, those kinds of things. In the center, you have esteem and belongingness, and that has to do with relationships and other people. And at the top, you have yourself. You have becoming more yourself and becoming more fully who you are. It's not that you have to have the bottom absolutely nailed all the time in order to ever move up that pyramid, but you can move up and down in it and satisfy different needs at different times. But in the moment of trying to enter into a flow state and have your work be central to you, you have to know that other stuff's under control. Like, you have to be secure in the lower needs before you can be in that self-actualizing state. So here's the dream. And there is the reality, right? So you have the dream of being, solo in your studio and just kind of letting the work happen and letting it flow over you as long as you want it, as long as you're able to just stay there. And the reality is to-do lists and, answering, emails at 9 p.m. and having, a bunch of requests fly at you the first thing you wake up in the morning is when you're still in bed and you're like looking at your notifications. That's the reality we live with. And that is the reality that we have to address if we want to create the conditions for flow in your life. So, characteristics of flow. Let's get back to this list. This is the area here where you have the two most endangered pieces of flow, given the way that our modern life works. So the reflective self-consciousness, being able to, a loss of reflective self-consciousness, you can't stop thinking about yourself and thinking about your relationship with people if people are constantly reminding you that you owe them something and that you should be doing something for them, right? So that's a way in which they're sort of like pulling you back out of that self-actualized state. Sense of personal control or agency. If you don't have control over your time, you can't feel like you can really push into that edge of your abilities. This is a quote from Flow that's actually quoted in Deep Work. So, ironically, jobs are easier to enjoy than free time because, like flow activities, they have built-in goals, feedback rules, and challenges, all of which encourage one to become involved in one's work, to concentrate and lose oneself in it. And Mihai is comparing the difficulty of finding a flow in self-generated work versus the context of a job. But what's, I think, really clear here is that Mihai never entered the contemporary workplace. Like, this is from the book is from like 1991 or something like that. He never dealt with Slack, right? Like, he didn't have any of that stuff. He didn't work in an open plan office. He was at the University of Chicago in the Ivory Tower, right? He could go to work and know that there were goals he needed to meet and sit down and work towards those things. He was in a kind of specialized place in that way. There may have been a mythical time in American history when at least cisgendered, upper middle class white males might have had that kind of freedom to go to their office and take a creativity nap and then come up with the brilliant campaign. That might have happened. I'm not quite sure it did. But in fact, what we deal with day to day is a room of one's own versus reality, right? So what stands in the way? This is going to be kind of obvious, but I'm going to dive into these bits a little bit more. So obviously you're busy, right? Who's busy here? A little bit busy? Yeah. Who's overcommitted? Okay. Who has a fuzzy grasp with space-time continuum? Yeah. So this is like, these are all real things. And so I'm going to give you a few examples of that. I have a client named Jenny who's a consultant, and she, when I met her, was just utterly buried in work. Like she just had, like, she was working, 10, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, all the time. And basically, she would just every day say, like, I have all these things I need to do. She would start doing something. It would take her 3 or 4 times as long as she thought it was going to take her. All the other stuff fell off her list, and she's just like, what am I going to do now? And she'd have to do it in the night or do it on Sunday, right? She'd have to just kick those things down the line. So that's not understanding how long things take, okay? So that's what that basically is about. Busy. All right, so I have a friend named Stephanie. She is she's running a small business, or starting to get involved in a small business that has a great product, great customers, they love them, but the back end is a mess, and she has a ton to do on the back end of this company. She also is a full-time professor, and she is also has a freelance business as a designer, and she has a 4-year-old. She's busy. Like the second she wakes up in the morning, her daughter needs her, and then something else comes up, and then something else comes up. There's no room to think about any kind of actual conscious choices at all in her life. Okay, overcommitted. I have another client named Amy who is a journalist. She's a really accomplished print journalist. She's been doing it for 30 years. She runs a podcast company and puts out 3 podcasts a week. She's a long distance runner. She's a foster dog mom for rescue dogs and has 10 or 15 dogs at a time. She's a mom of 2 adult children. She's a wife of another full-time journalist, and she wants to write children's books. So everybody in her life, her husband, her boss, everybody, me, was like, you have to quit some stuff. You were overcommitted. And she's like, you don't know me. I can. But every day she ended the day feeling miserable and like she'd failed herself because she wasn't doing the thing that she wanted to be doing, which is writing the children's books. And eventually she had to come to terms with that and understand, and I'll get back to her in a minute. So let me just get to this really clearly. So all of you guys are probably sitting here going like, oh my God. Your daily experience of chaos is totally not your fault. It's not that you can't change it and you can't take control of it, because you can, and I'm going to get to that. But the fact that you are in the state that you're in terms of business and overcommitted, being overcommitted, all this stuff, is not really your fault, because your monkey brain is taking over. And our monkey technology that runs our bodies and our brains is not suited for the contemporary world, right? There are things that happen at the monkey brain level that counteract what we know is best for us and what we really want to be doing. All 3 of these women are in the scarcity trap. That's what's going on with them. And frequently, I would say, like, anybody here who's super identifying with the stories I just told, you're in a scarcity trap too. I've been in one for like 30 years. Like, it's a big trap. We're all in there together. So what is scarcity? I'm using the term scarcity as defined by the authors of the book Scarcity, Senthil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, who talk about scarcity as a perceived lack, and this is important, a perceived lack of anything, a perceived lack of something is scarcity. They started looking at scarcity, financial scarcity, because they were looking at the problems of endemic poverty and what could they do about that and how can they solve that problem. But as they did their research, they realized that this principle of scarcity actually applies in any dimension. So it applies to calorie scarcity. So who's been on a diet and can't stop thinking about food, right? Like as soon as you say, I'm restricting my calories, you start thinking about food all the time. All you can think about is that. Time scarcity. So if you're super busy and your time is super full, you're like constantly trying to cram stuff in and everything kind of rolls down the line, right? Social bond scarcity. If you're lonely, all you do is think about being lonely and wanting to be with people. So there's all kinds of different ways in which scarcity can kick in, and I would argue there's a lot more than just that. It's across the board. When you feel a lack, what happens is your brain snaps into tunnel mode, and all it can think about is that thing that's scarce, and trying to get that thing that's scarce. This is monkey brain. And focuses on getting it solved today, right now, in this tiny little bubble, right, in this tiny little tunnel that you're in, and can't think really about anything else on the outside. So what's really important about this is scarcity thinking kicks in at a non-conscious level. So you do not have control over it. You can't say, I'm not going to feel scarce today. I'm not going to feel scarcity. You can't decide that. It happens automatically. And it happens in milliseconds. As soon as you sense this, that, I probably talked about dieting and you guys started thinking about food. Am I right? Right? Like it's anytime you sort of sense that scarcity, your body kicks into gear. That's why it's monkey brain. That's why it's not your fault. There are things you can do about it, but you have to do those at a very conscious human level, not monkey level. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. So scarcity begets more scarcity. And this is Melanathan on the Hidden Brain, which is a podcast episode. If you just want like the sort of short version of this, I really recommend it. When you have scarcity and it creates a scarcity mindset, it leads you to take certain behaviors, which in the short term help you manage scarcity, but in the long term only make matters worse. So when Jenny, my consultant client, was sort of trying to cram through and like putting all these things onto one day, and she was kicking stuff to the next day had twice as many things on it. It wasn't that it was empty, there was no room, right? So everything just gets kicked down the line. That's a scarcity trap. It's a negative feedback loop where you get into a worse and worse and worse situation because you are never able to pull back and solve the root problem, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit. So there's our scarcity brain rolling his eyes at us. So how do you achieve a flow state on a regular basis, given this, what we're fighting against, given how hard it is, and how unconscious it is, how much it's not in your control that you're going to feel the scarcity? We have this myth that the way creativity happens is that the muse flies down and then leans over and kisses you on the forehead, and then suddenly it flows out of you, right? That you have to feel inspiration, that it has to be, magical in this kind of way. And it's a lie. It's totally not true. You don't need to think about living your truth, daily affirmations, adopting an abundance mindset. Like none of those things work. That's not how it happens. You can't adopt mindsets. That's what I'm saying about the scarcity brain. Learning and understanding do not come first. Action comes first. Take different actions and the mindset adopts you. So let's escape from the scarcity trap. This is Amy when she was at that point, the breaking point where she's like, I have to do something different. I can't live this way anymore. This is Amy, the journalist who wants to write children's books. I don't wake up knowing this is what I want to work on with some skeletal plan. I want to let creativity be my guide, but it's not my guide. Chaos is my guide. Creativity is like, hey dummy, why don't you make a little plan and we can get some stuff done? So we're going to make a little plan. Because the most reliable creative time comes about when you set up guardrails against scarcity in advance, not when you're in that state, because you can't. You literally, your IQ in solving the immediate problem shoots up, and your IQ, your functional IQ in terms of long-term thinking, drops dramatically. You're literally dumber when it comes to long-term thinking when you're in the scarcity trap in that moment. So that's why you have to do it ahead of time. You have to set up guardrails and rules that keep you moving in the right direction. So, what to do? Number one, track your time. I know you're going to hate this. Everybody hates this. It's normal to hate this. You don't have to do it forever, but you need to do it for a few weeks in order to gather data, because you need to know how long do things actually take you. This is Jenny, my consultant friend. She needed to learn to live in Euclidean space-time. So she tracked her time, and she says, steps always took me longer than I thought they should, so I was overly ambitious with my days, and I ended every day feeling disappointed in myself. Once I tracked my time, I realized that in fact it takes me a minimum of 2 hours to write a proposal for a new client from an interview. Sometimes it takes 4. Now instead of feeling like I should have gotten it done, and these 4 other things, I schedule it. It was a huge change. And I tell you, every time I talk to her, she's just like, time tracking was it. Like, that was the magic key. Like, all I needed to know was how long things actually take and put that time on my actual calendar, and things started to fall into place. And they did. I mean, when I started working with her, she had one person she collaborated with every once in a while. Her clients loved her, but she was working alone and totally swamped. And now she has a firm of 10 contractors and is working with like Amazon. I mean, this is like 2 years later. She's just transformed everything. And it's like such a simple key. The thing is that aspirational planning, this idea of aspirational planning, which the term comes from Jen Loudon, is what happens when you just put a bunch of stuff kind of like oh yeah, I'm going to do that, right? It's not about facing the dilemmas of like, can I do this or that? You know, there's limited time in my day. I'm going to choose which of these things are going to happen. It's about thinking magically somehow this is all going to happen, right? And you end up living in the red zone. You end up having 28 items on Monday on your to-do list, which is just not humanly possible. You cannot do 28 things on Monday, right? And so those things are going to slide, and you're going to end up with 40 things or whatever in your past due red zone, and just feel like crap every day because you're looking at that red number going like, that sucks. I hate that, and I hate myself because I can't get that under control. Your to-do list is not a calendar. So this list of things you want to do does not relate to calendar time. You have to actually put the thing on the calendar. So when you're tracking your time, you can start to understand how much time things take, and you can give it a reasonable time in your calendar. So I have a worksheet here. Like, there's a sign up at the back. You could pass it around, actually, for my newsletter. And if you sign up for that, I'm going to send you this worksheet. And it's designed to help you get through time tracking a little bit more easily. The idea is, on the left column here, you would create a skeletal plan, as Amy puts it, like just kind of a plan for your day. And then on the right, you track what actually happened. Now, I guarantee you're going to feel like crap looking at this the first few times. You're going to be like, wow, I just spent 45 minutes like screaming on Twitter. That was stupid. But what you need to do is approach it with a scientific mindset. You're like a sociologist doing a time-use study on yourself. So you kind of look at this, you write it down, you like record the information, you're like, fascinating. And then you just like move on. That it's all about data. It's not about blame. It's not about even changing anything initially. It's just about knowing how long things take you. Okay, number 2, make a to-do list for tomorrow. Today, do it today. Make a to-do list for tomorrow with only the things on it you can actually do tomorrow. Right? So you have to limit yourself to things that can actually happen tomorrow. The rest of the stuff can stay on a list somewhere. You don't want to throw it away. You want to make sure you can remember it somehow. But don't put it on your to-do list for tomorrow, because you're just going to end the day feeling like you failed. Imagine how great it would be to check off those things and be like, I win, right? Like, it's amazing. So this is Stephanie, who I went on a retreat with a few weeks ago to help do we both needed to do strategic planning, and so we planned this retreat to go away for a day or a couple days and do strategic planning. And one of the things that she's trying to figure out for this business that she's running is the financials. Like, it really is, it's very confused. A lot of work needs to be done in terms of getting it straightened out. So I was teaching her how to use YNAB. Who uses YNAB? You need a budget? Oh my God, you guys, get YNAB. It's amazing. But so Stephanie was getting YNAB up and rolling to figure out like what was going on and sort of sort this stuff out. She ended up doing it for like 8 hours on 2 days. She was like, just kept going like transactions and and categorizing, like all this stuff. And she was in such a tunnel. She was like this, because she's like, I have to solve this financial situation right now. I have to know what's going on right now. And I kept saying, Stephanie, let's stop and do this strategic work that we're here for while we're here. Let's do it. And I had to ask her like 4 or 5 times. Like, I had to like drag her out of it. And she said, even while we were doing it, part of her brain is like, transactions, which was like her scarcity instinct trying to protect her, trying to keep her safe and say, let's solve this problem of not knowing where the financials are and feeling insecure about that right now, today. And so she said, entering data ended up being a safe space for me. I was actually afraid of what to do afterwards. I should have stopped sooner. I was getting foggy by the time I got organized at the end. Doing that outline of what my goals are, I should have had a cup of coffee and done that first thing. So she didn't really know what her top priority was for the day. She didn't really think about it the day before. So on the same time tracking sheet, at the top here, there's a section that's top 3s. This is designed to help you focus in and decide what that priority is for tomorrow. Their top tasks or top focus areas are up there. And when you fill that in, and you need to do it, again, the day before, not the morning of, right? You have to do this before and think it through. In the morning, when something flies at you, you're able to say, no, my priority is this. Your priority comes next. I know what my priority is because I've already decided. I've already committed to that. I've already put time on the calendar. I know what I'm doing. And so you're able to stand in that power and properly order the kind of requests that are flying at you first thing in the morning. Number 3, determine your one goal and say no to virtually everything else. So the one goal is a concept I teach in my Creative Focus workshop and with coaching clients. And the basic idea is it is your top one creative priority. And that you focus on just that one creative priority for a period of time until it's finished or until you hit a milestone and you need to switch gears. Now, why would you focus on one thing? All you guys have a million projects, I'm sure, a million things you want to get done. This is kind of a picture to give you an idea why you would want to do that. Imagine you have 8 different projects and you have 8 hours to devote to them in a given week. The most logical thing seems to be to do an hour on each project and budge everything along, right? But imagine you put all 8 hours into one project and you do one thing for that 8 hours. Some of those hours may be flow hours, but even if they're not fully in that flow state, they're going to be much more effective hours. So it's not just more hours. You're not just going to hit a milestone because you get to, that entire 8 hours on one thing. It's also that they're better hours because you're not, you don't have context switching time costs going from one thing to another. You're not trying to hold the mental load of 8 projects at the same time and juggle all of the things that are going into all those different projects at the same time. You're focusing on one thing, and that one thing is working both when you're doing it and when you're not doing it. Your unconscious, your non-conscious brain is working on that problem even when you're not working. But the thing I want to point out here, all these things are not happening, and you have to be okay with that. Like, you have to be okay with the idea that all the other projects on your list are not getting touched all week. And that's the hard part. That's the really painful part. Amy, my journalist client, has been going around and saying no to people's faces all over the place. She's resigned from boards. She's stopped doing various things with her podcast company. She quit her job. She gave notice at her job because she's like, I am not going to be happy in my life unless I write this book. I have to write this book, so I'm quitting my high-powered journalism job. Like, that's major. And she's had to go through this huge evolution in order to realize that that was super important to her and necessary. But the weight has just fallen from her shoulders, and she's so much happier right now. So she says, in writing, they say you have to be willing to kill your babies to finish the story. And I feel like that's what I'm doing, abandoning things that need me. Things that will never see the light of day, so I have to start there. This is what happens when you don't make choices. This is my life for the last 12 years, and I put this together in order to demonstrate for like a talk about why did I take 12 years to finish a 200-page book. Why did I take 12 years to do a project that should have taken 2 or 3? This is why. Because I didn't make choices. I thought I could multitask. You can't multitask. All I did was switch from one thing to the next thing, and back to one thing, and back to the other thing, and back to the other. It took forever. Everything took forever and got dragged out, and the work was not as good as it could have been. So I also have a worksheet for that, which again, if you want it, you can get it on my mailing list. I will send it out to anybody who's here. But you can also do this on your own. But the important thing is that you actually look at all your projects and consciously decide, okay, this really is the number one. And I am okay with saying no to these other things. It's going to be hard. You're going to go down in Maslow's pyramid and have to face those esteem and relationship things, right? Because that's when you're saying no to people. And it's going to be really difficult to do. But you can do it, right? If you see what's most important, then you can do what's most important. So let's go over the 3 things again. Number 1, you need to live in Euclidean space-time. You need to track your time and understand how long times actually take you. Number 2, you need to make time for planning the night before. So just a tiny bit of time to just think, like, what are my top things for tomorrow will make a huge difference. Even if you're not doing weekly planning, monthly, quarterly, whatever. Just tomorrow, that's it. Start with that and it will make a really big difference. And number 3, get ultra clear on your priorities. If you know what's most important to you, you can stand in that power and you can tell other people what's most important to you. And you can say no to things that conflict with those priorities. But you can't do it until you know. This is the thing. Flow, attaining flow, having flow regularly in your life, doing the thing that is at the core of why we're sitting in this room. It's not magic. It's not a kiss from the muse. It's not luck. It takes concentration. It takes strategy. It is hard, but it's completely 100% doable. You can create the conditions for flow in your life.